Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Teach Middle East podcast. My name is Lisa Grace, and today I am chatting with Matthew Burfield. He is the principal of GEMS Founders School Dubai, and he's also a senior vice president of education for GEMS Education. And we are going behind the principal's desk to get to know Matthew a little bit better, to get to know what makes him tick. What does Matthew like to do when he is not dressed in a three-piece suit and adorned with his badges on his lanyard? What does Matthew get up to? Welcome to the podcast, Matthew.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That's a great introduction. And well, hopefully I can provide you with lots of insight into what is Matthew when he's not wearing a three-piece suit. I'll do my best.
I'm sure you will. Matthew is a good sport. I have known him in the space for a few years now. So I know that, Matthew can get down with the get down. And my listeners know that I like to get down with the get down. So let's get into it. Matthew, give me some early snapshots. Where are you from? Where did you start your teaching career and what led you to Dubai? Oh, that's a lot, but let's go from the beginning.
All right, from the very beginning. So where I'm from, or where I was born, was in Norwich, in Norfolk, back in the UK. So I started my education, or my own as a child education journey in Norfolk. And I moved, though, quickly out of Norfolk. I don't know if you've ever been there, Lisa, but there's just one road in and one road out. So you want to get out of there pretty quickly, although I do have fond memories of childhood in terms of where I grew up. It was definitely a place to get out of if you wanted more. And so I would say that most of my young adult and adult life was more in Southeast London, a little bit in Southwest London, but mostly Southeast London. So I lived in Peckham for a good number of years, lived over in Brixton, and then moved out to East London for a little bit, into Leytonstone, and then went to Athens, Greece for 5 years. So I'm just giving you all of it, and then we can unpick whichever you want. And then 8 years ago, moved out here into Dubai. And to answer the bit about, I guess, where I started was my mum was a deputy head of primary school and a Senko. So I'm sure we'll touch on those things that are important to me in education. And so that's why special educational needs are really, really close to my heart. I watched my mum in her role as a Senko for many years be very happy in her role, but obviously deal with something really challenging as it would have been back then, particularly. So I kind of got this excitement of teaching and education as a very early age. I used to see a lot of my friends' parents come home and then be a bit miserable and not so happy. But my mum used to come home buzzing and really happy. So it was one of those things I thought, well, that looks like a good job. I had a love for history, which was absolutely instilled in me from my Year 7 history teacher, Mr. Watson. And so I went on to study history at university, came out, thought, what am I going to do with this degree? And history teaching seemed to be a really great idea. So then did my PGC and started teaching in Herne Hill in Southeast London, which is just near Peckham, for my first 5 years. And NQT developed and grew my career, and we can talk about all those little bits as we go through. But that's what got me through, and that's where I started.
Okay, brilliant. Teacher's kid. What were you like in school then, Matthew?
I was an absolute nightmare at school. I mean, fortunately, my mum's school was different to my school. Otherwise, it may have been different. But my mum was in a school in a different town to me. Yeah, I think I was a very challenged child. My home situation wasn't a particularly nice home in many ways. You know, my father had lots of mental health issues. And so that home life situation, it was difficult. It wasn't easy. My mum made a lot of it a lot easier and did everything that mothers around the world who still astound and amaze me. I'm not sure how they manage the way they do, but I wouldn't say raised by a single parent, but it felt like that a lot of the time. So I had a difficult time at home, and that meant what I wanted to do was get out of that home and wanted to start down a different journey. And yeah, so my school life, I'm sure I had good days and bad days, but I wasn't particularly easy at school. I can't imagine my teachers will recall me very well, except for Mr. Watson, who I mentioned. He'll recall me well, I'm sure. But then I didn't do great at school. I wasn't great with my exam results. I think I didn't really find myself, if you want to use that phrase, but I didn't find who I was and what I was all about until I left that rather challenging family home, went off to university, and then went, okay, this is who I want to be and where I want to get to. And then I did quite well in my studies and things. But school and my GCSEs and A-levels, they're nothing to shout about. And I do tell children that on a regular basis, that I've done quite well for myself, even though I only got a C in maths at GCSE, and it wasn't the end of the world for me. So yeah, it was being a teacher's child, a mixed bag, I guess. There's definitely that, a mixed bag.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. And so Peckham and
Yeah,
Brixton. And
yeah.
so you're talking to a Jamaican British. So you know it's my ends. What was life
For
like
sure.
there?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, you will know then the rice and peas shop on Acre Lane in Brixton, which was one of my favourite places to stop. But I lived in Peckham for 5 years. I was in Peckham, and then I worked as well in Brixton for a little while and moved across that little southeast to southwest border. I didn't like to go north of the Thames. I wanted to stay south of the Thames, obviously, but. Look, it was a very diverse, multicultural society in Peckham, and you will know yourself, but it's more of an African community. So I was surrounded by Ghanaians, Nigerians, and, all that wonderful, beautiful African colour that you get. So I was surrounded by all of that for most of my early career. Literally until I left London, that was pretty much my experience as a young man growing up, if that's what I did. So I loved that. I mean, the colours and the smells and all those wonderful flavours. And then moving across to Brixton and the more Caribbean side of things, it was definitely different. And it was amazing seeing that cultural shift and the way things were. But I enjoyed that just as much. And I've still got wonderful memories and still some really great friends that draw me back to London whenever I get the chance to go back and catch up with them and sit down and talk to them. So it was a very interesting experience, but it was filled with what I hope I then took into my teaching profession. It was filled with diversity, and it was filled with different, and it was filled with new ways of thinking, or at least different ways of thinking than perhaps I'd experienced growing up. And so that allowed me to come into a classroom where, to be honest, in some classes, I may have been the only white person in that room. But it allowed me to at least get an idea, okay, I understand a bit of where you're coming from. I'm never going to get it completely, but I have a little insight, a little door opening to help me understand what you're talking about and why you're reacting the way you were. So yeah, it was incredibly exciting part of my life. I met my wonderful wife during that time, so who still continues to put up with me. So it's an incredibly exciting part of my life. And I think I know it made me become a really outstanding teacher really quickly, because in those communities that I was teaching in that were quite challenging, state schools, if you weren't really good straight away, you didn't put the effort in, then the lesson would be chaos. Chairs would be thrown around. It would just be chaos. And I had a few of those experiences, don't get me wrong, but you learn really quickly, I've got to deliver, I've got to know my children, I've got to build relationships, my material's got to be good, it's got to be thoughtful, it's got to be considered, because if it isn't, I'm going to lose them in the first 15 minutes, and then I'm going to end up, curled up in the corner on hoping that the lesson ends, which unfortunately I saw a few colleagues go through in my time in those schools.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like you're talking, I mean, obviously, I'm not south of the Thames,
No,
and if you went to school in London, you know that South London man and North London man them don't mix.
I
So
don't
let's not
mix.
let's
I
not
don't
get colloquial. The people out here know me as Lisa Gray, so I'm gonna keep it polished. Here's a question for you, Matthew. Dubai, you've been
Mhm.
here 8 years. What's your
Yes.
journey been like out here as an educator?
Yeah, it's been an incredibly interesting part of my career journey and my life journey. So I was sitting in a little school in Athens. I have to give a bit of context, Lisa, before I answer. So I was sitting in a lovely little school in Athens, Greece. I was a head teacher in a beautiful school in Athens, Greece called Byron College. It had 200 children when I first got there, all through school, 200 children. So you can imagine one class all the way through. It was 500 children by the time I left. We grew it to its capacity, but it was still small, even certainly in this context, but even in international school context, it was still small. And I was sitting there, it was my 5th year, and I love this school. I still love it now for what it helped me learn as a leader. And I had a LinkedIn request from somebody here in Dubai, an executive search person who actually worked for GEMS. I met them obviously afterwards. Just, do you want to have a chat and come out and see what we do? to which I said, well, why not go and have a look and see what it is? And so I got on that plane and, got flown out here. And, I'm sure as everybody arrives here, you just get that, wow, like what is happening here? Like, it just amazed, absolutely amazing. And as a history teacher, country 52, 53 years old, you just think, how have they done this to begin with? And of course, there's all that initial wow factor. So I got out here, it was end of 2015, and then was offered the job, was appointed, but I was still a head teacher back in Athens. So I was working there in Athens during the week, and then on Sundays, because we still worked Sundays back then, on Sundays I was jumping online, and then in half terms and holidays I was being flown out to do meet the parents and all the wonderful stuff that we do before we open a school. So out here, I finished in Byron on the 1st of July, and I flew here on the 2nd of July, and I landed and started at GEMS on the 2nd of July. Officially, contractually, I started there. And we had what was then 8 weeks before we opened GEMS Founders School. So with the school that I'm now stood in today, we opened that in September 2016. And at that stage, we'd reached a fairly record enrollment number for the company anyway. We were just breaking through the 1,000 in terms of enrollments, and then hit the 1,881 in the September that we opened. So it was a monumental opening. I do remind my bosses regularly that I signed a contract on 320 children as an opening number. So when we hit 1881, I was asking for a review of that contract pretty early on. But it was an amazing opening for our school. And then that leadership journey, I was a founding principal, surrounded by just the most amazing people, I mean, genuinely, who are all still here with me today. The most amazing people. We opened the school. It wasn't, as you would open a school in Dubai, there was generators still running some of the electricity, there was water still being, the normal school opening, I think, although it was accentuated to a level of stress because it was 1,881 children. So it was a little bit more hard than the normal opening. By Christmas, we had all that done. And then we kept opening different parts of the school. So we opened a new phase 2. We moved to 3,200. We opened the phase 3. We're now at 6,200 in the school. So the growth of the school has been exponential. And I hope my colleagues would agree, my growth as a principal during that 7-8 year cycle has been exponential as well. I've learned things from colleagues and people around me, parents and from children regularly, all sorts of things that I never knew before, even though I've been a head teacher for 5 years in an international school, completely different context, and learned so many new things here. So yeah, I think that learning journey that I've taken is phenomenal. And the way that, the company GEMS I work for has invested in me, and therefore I'm now a senior vice president of education, as you said in your intro, which means I get to look after 6 other schools, line manage those 6 principals, and help grow their schools and support them in their educational journey. So it's been just the most phenomenal journey. I mean, each part of that we could probably spend an entire podcast talking about, but it's just the entire journey has been really quite special for me professionally. Personally, I've also had another child since we've been here. So I got a little son who was born here in Dubai and joined our family of 3 as we were at the time. So personally, that journey has been something else as well. I've become a father for the 2nd time and have a little boy in my life now who's just started school this year, actually. So yeah, a whole journey all wrapped around in some wonderful, wonderful experiences.
That's amazing. I love that. And the Founders brand is growing because there will now be Founders Abu Dhabi. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, obviously we're full with a fairly long waiting list here in Dubai. GEMS Founders Mizar, we added a new phase to them this year. That's going to be full by next year as well. The demand is just so incredible on our brand. So the 3rd one in Abu Dhabi is opening in Masdar City. It's going to be Founders brand, so therefore will look and feel very similar. But like GEMS Founders Mizar will also have some unique parts to it. So obviously, GEMS Founders Mizar has got a large Emirati community. So it's obviously recognizes that and looks at that in a different way than for me, who I only have 101 out of my 6,200 are local people in my school. So it's a slightly different feel, even though the brand and the model is almost identical. So Masdar City, as it is in Masdar, is going to have a very unique selling point and a very unique feel in terms of it's going to be net zero energy. So we have designed the entire plot of land, and it is a wonderful plot of land. Unlike so many schools, it's got access roads all round it, so it's going to have access all over it. But we've got solar panels everywhere. Every car parking space is covered, so we can put solar panels into it. Every single bit of technology going into the school is being thought about and considered. Is it at this rating so that it can meet this net zero energy demand? So that's going to be a really interesting project for us to deliver. It's the first in the region to do it at that level. There's loads of great sustainable projects in our schools and in Dubai schools all over the place. But this is going to be a really nuanced net zero energy, which if we do it, and we have the capacity to do it, it's going to be something I think that can then be replicated across all schools, because we'll be able to bring that part of it into the rest of our schools and reverse engineer them. That's the plan anyway. That's my plan. That's what I'm looking at.
It sounds fab. I can't wait to see it. I was reading a bit about it and I thought, oh, that looks good. And it's not too far from where I live. So I was like, okay, that should be an interesting one to look at.
Well, we'll definitely bring you over for a visit. The groundbreaking's happened, the piling's happening, the building is going up, and it's opening in September 2024. So we're really excited about it. Enrollments have started, and the flood of enrollments, as often happens when you launch a founder's brand, has started. So we're really looking forward to opening that in September 24. And when I'm up there, I'll invite you over. We'll have a walk around and I'll show you what I've been talking about.
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about Matthew at home, right? So Matthew is a dad of young kids. How do you make sure that you stay connected to them and their development as such a busy professional school leader and, senior vice president of education? So that's like huge roles that you play. How do you keep connected to the little ones?
Great question, Lisa. So I've got a 12-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy. So there's quite a difference between them. So they're both very different, as you can probably imagine. And so the best way I could answer that, because it is a tough one, because I wrestle with this constantly, exactly as you just described me, that busy profession with all these responsibilities. But I am a father and a husband, and actually those will always and should always be my anchor points in life, and they will be. I forget about it sometimes as I get drawn into all the work, but they absolutely draw me back in. So how do I remain connected in a really practical way? One of the things that I always do, so I start relatively early in the morning. I'm usually in the office by between 5:30, 6, and I usually work until about 6-ish, sometimes a bit later, but usually until about that. So one of the practical ways I always stay connected is I'm always home for bed and bath. So I will always, except for exceptional circumstances, be home to do bed and bath time. So that means for my little boy, I don't need to put my 12-year-old in the bath anymore, but I'm there for bedtime and I'm there for story time and bedtime reading, which we do, always. It's just such an important part of the routine of going to bed. So I'm always there for that. So even though in the morning I'm gone by the time, anybody else is up usually, this part is really important for me to get back for that. And that helps me have that instant connectivity. It helps me understand how their day's been. We have a quick catch up and we talk about at least the way their day's been. And I am, at least I hope, daily in their life in terms of that. But in reality, the way that I cope and the way that I can manage, and I mentioned, once my wonderful wife, Maria, is absolutely the reason why this works. And I've told her this 100 times, but you can probably never say it enough. But she's the reason this works, because she is an exceptional professional herself, has a PhD from Imperial College in molecular biology, was a cancer researcher when I met her. She could be changing the entire world, I'm sure, but she has taken that time away from her profession, as many mothers do and have to do sometimes, and taken that time to instead look after the children, look after the home, do her best to look after me. She's still doing courses and degrees and all sorts of things when she gets the chance to stretch her brain, because it really is quite an amazing brain. But she's taken that time to then be that glue that keeps us all together, that reminds me when I'm running late, that reminds me that I should be there, that tells me, look, there's this thing that we need to do on Saturday and we have to do that. And without her as that real nucleus of our family, it wouldn't feel like this. Our children wouldn't be as wonderful and happy and, you know, and fantastic as they are, I certainly wouldn't probably still be sane, I don't think. So in terms of that, she is absolutely the glue behind all of it. So there's some practical things I try and do, but in truth, Lisa, 100% I would give, well, let's say 99% is Maria keeping us all together, keeping us all sane, and bringing in, because she's Greek, her nationality is Greek, and so that family ethos and that meaning of family and sitting around the dinner table, which I try to get home most of the time for that even, that's still really important. And at the weekend, we always have breakfast, lunch and dinner. We sit around the table together, and it's what you do, and it's what she expects us to do, and it's absolutely that connectivity. So yeah, 100% down to Maria why this still works and why I'm still alive and well, and hopefully will be for a lot longer to come.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Kudos to Maria. How do you keep Maria
absolutely.
happy? What do you do for Maria? What special things do you do for her to keep her happy? Because, you know, you need to.
That's, I mean, I don't do enough. I find me a husband that does, but I don't do enough. But what I try to do is try to be there in terms. So I think in the early parts of our relationship, if I go back, I was there, I was thinking, okay, so gifts and this and that, and that, you know, and I know that's nice and we all love them, don't get me wrong, yeah, who doesn't love a nice gift? But I think quickly I understood that you know, Maria is not particularly materialistic, but also it was nice and it was something that made her happy for a few moments, but actually that wasn't really going to sustain the relationship that we've had for 23 years now. So I hope what I do, and I hope she, if she was still would say that, I try to make sure that when she's talking to me and when she's speaking with me about things that she wants to speak about, whatever they are, that I don't give them any less importance to all the things that are going on in my brain, which I perceive to be really important, because of course work's important and this job is important and those children are important. And in my head, and again, I know I don't get this right all the time, in case she listens to this, I know I don't get it right all the time, but I really try to be there when she's talking and be there for her, because that for me seems to be what she needs, is that person in her life who genuinely is going to be there no matter what else is going on. You're going to be there for them when they need you, and sometimes that is just needed to talk through the day and just to say what happened, and you know, and it may be very simple things that went on, but you just want to convey that to somebody, because for her, with this great mind that she has, you know, she has a 12-year-old and a 4-year-old, and that is pretty much her world all day, every day, running around, and sometimes she just wants to talk with an adult about adult things. And so I learn, hopefully, and I'm going to keep getting better, but I learned that that's probably the most important thing in my wife's life, for me to be there when I'm there, to actually be there and to be present. And I definitely haven't done that well when I started this role. Definitely not very well. And the phone was constant and I never stopped. And I'm trying to get better at that. And so when we go on holidays and we do things, I'm much more there than I know I was before. Round the dinner table, the phone doesn't come around the dinner table anymore. I make sure that that's not there. And it's the little things, but they have such a big impact on you know, hopefully keeping this amazing woman happy and content in terms of what we've decided to do and what we've chosen to do together in this journey that we're taking there at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's actually very refreshing to hear. It's you have a good sense of self-awareness, because some people would just say, "Oh, I am da 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 da," but I love that vulnerability, because it does show that you want to do better. So Maria, if you're listening to this, Matthew wants to do better. He's gonna take you on a nice, fabulous holiday where there will be no phones, and he's going to get sitters for the kids, and it's just going to be you two, and you're going to really rekindle the love that you have for each other. And it might even involve some kind of private chef cooking 5-star Greek food, a nice kleftiko, a nice spanagopitas.
Well, thanks for that, Lisa. Thanks for committing me to that. I really appreciate it.
Yes, he will. He's going to use some of that Gems Founders money for that. Okay. Now, here's something I really love to ask school leaders. How do you take care of you?
Self-care is something that we've started to now think about and talk about. I think it's not something that I grew up with anybody talking about this concept. Maybe they were, and I just wasn't plugged into that at the time. But that concept of self-care and thinking about what you need is very new to me. And I think, I mentioned before about the challenges of my world as I grew up. That I don't want to downplay it or overplay it, but it was a not a very nice place to be most of the times in my home. So I think I developed, as children do, children who've been through trauma and all sorts of things. You develop this thick skin where you don't get affected quite so much. You may be infected internally, but you can get through it and you develop resilience and you work through it. So I think that I grew up thinking that's what you do, and you develop that thick skin and you just get over it. Yeah, I mean, you just get on with it. And I think I definitely grew up in a world where, and as a man, it was like, well, man up and those sort of phrases that are still out there. I know they're still used. But be a man and man up and all that utter nonsense that I realise is utter nonsense. Now I'm a man, and I'm actually a father to a boy. I realise what a load of rubbish that is. But I grew up in a time when that was the case. And so that's what I thought you had to do. And so, yeah, look, I've been on a mental health journey myself throughout all of this. I've had to take times and pause and speak to somebody. And, I've been open with colleagues. This is nothing that, is not necessarily public, but not something that I don't wish to share is, I've been to a counsellor before. I've had therapy before. I've spoken to somebody when I needed it. I also have the most amazing executive coach now, Dr. Helen Wright. And, she's worked with me for a good number of years and she's just phenomenal. And so that really helps because although it is a professional executive coach, of course you're getting some personal stuff every now and then. And, she's just such a wonderful person to talk to. So I try to take care of myself more now than I ever did. Honestly, I would say the first 30, maybe 35 years of my life, I don't think I even thought self-care or this concept even existed. You're a man, get on with it, get on and do these things was the narrative in my head. So clearly, as I say, as I start to get a little bit older and maybe a bit wiser, I understand what silliness that was and that I need to get that self-care. So there's an element of reaching out and talking to the right people when I need to and looking for those triggers when it comes up and going, okay, that's a time when I probably need to give Helen a call, or that's a time where I actually just need to not come in and work on Saturday or Sunday, which I do sometimes, and just be like, no, I'm not going to do that this weekend. It's going to be a pause. And so I'm starting to see those flags more as I start to open my own mind of what that means. That's definitely part of it. And then another part of it that I've done more in the last 5-6 years, I would say, is really invest in my own hobby that I've had for the last 27, 28 years, is I'm a comic book collector. So I collect comic books from all over the ages and ranges. And so last 5-6 years, I've really invested more. And I mean, as in obviously financially, but actually more in my time investing in that collection and opening the books and reading them, not just keeping them in the bags and keeping them safe like most collectors, actually reading them and engaging in them and reminding myself of how important that fantastical world of comics was to me as a child, because it was a world that I jumped into very often to release where I was actually physically, to release where I was to go somewhere else. So it's reminded me of all those wonderful stories that are told and all those things that can be created and the amazing vocabulary that is in comic books. I know people think it's quite a child thing or for children, but actually some of it is not, and it can be really deep and thought-provoking in my opinion anyway. So I have definitely invested more in that, and I've been very fortunate enough. I've got a little room in my house where I can go and have my collection, and I pull out the books and have a look through those. So 5-6 years, I've definitely done more of that when I can feel the points coming, rather than perhaps what I would do before, which is get annoyed or shout or do something silly that I then regret really badly at home with my family. I just retreat into the room for a few hours and then come out hopefully a refreshed person. So I'm trying to do more of that. But definitely self-care and mental health, and particularly male mental health. And that's not to take down the fact that women need to be well as well, but that male mental health thing for me has been quite important, because I've at least had that recognition in my brain and that awareness that it is important, and it's okay to not be okay. And sometimes I can have those days where I just go, I just don't want to face the world, and that's okay. I don't have to man up or any of that silliness that we talked about. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, but it's a journey, and I'm nowhere near even the middle of that path in terms of taking care of myself. It's certainly not as good as I would like it to be at the moment, but it's a journey, and I'm taking one foot in front of the other, which is the way you get through life, I think, in most cases.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. It's brilliant to first of all recognize that there is a need and a space needs to be made for that. Men generally don't like talking about these things. I think women are at an advantage in that we've got this kind of girlfriend sister circle that we normally find ourselves in, and we do offload, and it is therapeutic, even though it's not officially known as such. But men tend to bottle things up a lot more, and when they do come out, sometimes it's not expressed in the most constructive ways. But you're quite a driven person, Matthew, and you've done very well. Congratulations on all the achievements. I know I was at I can't remember I think the Excellence Awards, you were
Yes.
named Principal of the Year for that. And, I can see obviously from the news feeds, because I do get all the news that comes across my desk, all the different things that are happening. But I wanted to just find out from you, where do you see yourself as you progress in your career? Like what do you have on your roadmap, your personal roadmap?
Yeah, look, it's a question that's come up multiple times in the last couple of years in my mind, and with line managers and with mentors that I've been talking with. I'm 44 years old at the moment, so I know you don't think that, Lisa, looking at me with all this grey hair and they're not so much
Stop
hair
it.
on the head, but I'm just 44 years old. So in my mind, I've still got quite a long stretch of career left. I'm only halfway through really that bit of my journey. So I've got quite a long way to think about. And obviously at the moment I'm leading 7 schools, and that's wonderful. And I get to open new schools and work with amazing principals that are transforming schools all across the UAE, because I have a school in Sharjah and one opening up in Abu Dhabi, as we discussed. So I get to do all this wonderful work with people. And I think if I was to say where I want to get to in the future, I'm fascinated by operating models and the way schools operate. I'm fascinated by that. So I still have obviously a love of education and pedagogy and all those things, but I think I've just now stepped to a point in my career where, I'm never, I don't tell them openly, I'm not going to go back into a classroom and be an outstanding teacher like they are now. I could probably get through on a bit of charisma and some old stories, but I don't think I could be outstanding like teachers out here in my school are doing every day. I probably couldn't do that anymore. So my love of education has come into more, well, how do you make those schools work, and how do you create those cultures in the schools, and how can you make sure that all those bits of the operation, human resources, the buses, the traffic, I'm just looking out as my parents come for pickup now, in the car park. So, and particularly being out here in Dubai and just seeing, a school of 6,200 children, how can you make that operate is number one. So I like that problem solving concept of that. And I've been very blessed with, people around me. Hannah Davis was our MSO for so many years here with me, and she really helped me understand all those operating principles, which I didn't know before I came here. So I'm fascinated by that, but I'm fascinated by those concepts because I then want to be able to understand how you make something at this scale, this size, this sort of complexity, still maintain a culture within it, where I would say the vast majority of people that come, and every visitor I've ever brought into the school always says, oh, it just doesn't feel that big. It doesn't feel like you've got that many children. It doesn't, it's obvious you can't miss the school. It's obvious that we have, but they don't feel that when they walk in. And that's a really intangible piece of information. We don't feel like that. How do we then unpick that and break that down into culture? And there are lots more eminent people than me that are doing great research on this about school culture and how that would look. But I'm really fascinated on how you connect operations and culture and make sure those two things work really well together. And as I said, many more eminent people who are much better researched than me, but my initial conclusions all come down to one simple thing, which is people. And that sounds really obvious, doesn't it? But it actually is people, because the thing that I know has made this school successful, and GEMS Founders is just the most successful story in so many ways, and particularly with the news this week coming out of our very good in DSIB. You know, it's just a success story like none other. But that's happened because all of the people have fully invested in one single vision, in a set of values that wrap around that vision and make sure that we know we're true to ourselves, because we're not for everybody, and that's okay. So we've made sure we wrap those values around and we know who it is. At the very core and heart of that, and I mentioned to you earlier, Lisa, about my mum being a Senko, and I'm actually still the line manager of inclusion. I'm still the Sen champion in the school, which I'm not sure whether I should keep it anymore, but I just love it. And so my head of inclusion, Nalika, and I still work on that. And so if you keep that core of inclusion and you make sure that that is the mentality of everybody walking in, you make sure that that vision and values are all in place. But most importantly, every person in the building is an advocate for that, is a person that you can visually look, you can see that they are walking and talking those vision and values. And when you've got, and I've got 707 employees in this building now and 345 teachers, that is a huge challenge to make sure that all those individuals get inducted really quickly, get into the classroom, inculcate that with all of the people around them, you know, address parents in that way, look after their colleagues in that way, take care of all those wonderful little people that are running around our school, or not so little people as some of those sixth formers are. But, you know, how do we do that? It has to be getting the right people. And it's not the right people like principals. I mean, I know, you know, we're part of the puzzle, I guess. And, you know, but reality, it's the right receptionists, it's the right parent relations person. I'm looking out the window, so I'm looking at Simon, my head security guard, you know, getting him, who is the first person my parents see every time they drive through that gate, is Simon. It's not Matthew's face, it's Simon. And they see that man, and he is just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So it's getting all those key components, all those administrative people right, then making sure, of course, your academic leadership is correct and they want it, and then making sure that all the recruitment of all those teachers is as effective as possible. So how can we do this? How do we get that lovely sort of end result? It's through people. And I'd be fascinated in my future to answer the question, and I know I've gone a long way round to get there, Lisa, but I promise you I was getting there. To answer your question of where I see myself, I would love to be given the opportunity at a bigger level, a wider level, to look at those components of the operations of schools, how culture can be captured, and how we make sure we look after the people, so that those three parts of the triangle I hopefully have described well are protected and well maintained, because that means that the people in the middle, the children and the parents, they're going to be well taken care of, and they're going to be well looked after, and they're going to have amazing outcomes, because that is the ingredients you need to get where you want to get to. So I hope I answered that, Lisa. I took the country route to get there, but I hope I answered it.
I loved it. You did the scenic tour, and
Yes.
we don't mind. We don't mind because obviously you kind of gave us all the different ingredients that are needed to make sure that culture works simultaneously and works harmoniously is the word I needed.
Absolutely.
Works harmoniously. Thank you, Matthew. This has been lovely.
That's good. I'm glad.
It's been lovely having you. Thank you so much.
Well, look, I've really enjoyed it too. We didn't prepare anything, I'm sure, as your listeners are used to with you. You know, nobody really gets to see the questions first with Lisa. I've actually been on stage with Lisa at a conference, and, you know, she likes to throw the odd curveball as well that weren't even on the pre-prepared questions. I still recall you doing that to me once at a conference, but that's the way it should be, because that's how you get authenticity. And I'm sure the people that you choose to come and speak with you, that's what you're looking for, and that's certainly what your listeners will be looking for, is they want to hear the real story, which I hope I've given them about, well, at least me and who I am and what makes me tick and what keeps me as sane as maybe I am. But it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Really lovely to answer the questions, and look forward to seeing you soon and giving you a tour around Masdar in Abu Dhabi when we open that.
No, thank you very much. I think to encapsulate the podcast, Maria turned out to be the hero of this story. So shout out to Maria. Thank you so much. And thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much.